All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, be led by Mr. Bill Egner. Do we have a motion for the approval of the meeting minutes from May 23rd?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for the meeting 5/23.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Egner,
Yes.
Yeager,
Yes.
Udell. Yes. Stokes,
Yes.
Little, yes. Mercer, Livian, absent.
On old business, case number 2079 will be postponed to table until August. Let's go to case number 2060.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Evening, Planning Commissioners and members in the auditorium tonight. Chad Barr, Planning Director, to present the case here. We saw this last month, and we've seen it on occasion before as the applicant has been going through the entitlement process with the city as far as the sketch plat and the final plat. And then we saw it last month as far as the site plan design review. And there was a few things that needed to be touched upon for the Planning Commission's opinion. And so therefore we've got that before you again tonight on the agenda with some changes. So if Daniel, you could go ahead there. All right, next slide. All right, thank you. Next slide. And again, what we do, site plan design reviews, we break them into three sections, if you will. First are the architectural standards, and then the site plan layout, and then the landscaping standards. So there's these, what I call placeholder slides at various points through the PowerPoint presentation that kind of just explains why we have each segment and why the city is reviewing those. So next slide. So what we have here is two items. We have revised drawings as provided by the applicant from last month. And there's just two things here. One is the roof requirements. The city requires at least a 5 to 12 pitch. If they're going to go with a pitched roof, what's provided or what's proposed here is a 1/4 to 12, so it's less than the 5/12 pitch. And it's pointed there too with the number 1. And it's 20% glass as a building material on the front-facing facade, the public-facing facade. And the applicant has met that now. They were at about 16% last month, and they've bumped that up to 22%. You can see that there on the very top of that particular slide where it's highlighted with the number 2 there. So next slide, please. One issue of concern to the Planning Commission last month was the design. Since the property is located in the 100, they have designed for that. They will be elevating at least 2 feet above the base flood elevation, which is required by the city's floodplain ordinance, as found in, I believe it's in Chapter 14 of the City Code. But here, this is basically a kind of a snapshot of the design, where it's showing the pier structure underneath the entire building. We've sent that over to city engineering, and they've said that would be sufficient and work. So next slide. So here we get into the site plan review stage, how it's laid out, if you will. Next slide. Any of those slides, if anybody wants to stop and pause and have a question, or if they want me to read it or something like that, feel free to mention that, whether that's planning commissioners or what have you. And sometimes we're kind of familiar with them, and so we try to speed it up or whatever. But if you have a question, feel free to inquire on that, or we can go back to them later in the meeting. This slide here just basically says if the Planning Commission approves of the site plan, that the approval is good for one year from the date of approval. Next slide. So here, layout, the site plan layout of the property. I've tried to highlight a few things. We've got the building in the center, and we've got the required through the zoning ordinance of the play area in the back, and then there's also a detention pond. The property line here is highlighted with the pink box, or a pink line. The parking area is in the front. We've got the entrance point down in the southeast corner of the property. You can see Goodman Road West as it goes east to west there off the bottom. This one here, this was a requirement of the zoning ordinance. It's basically the property, if it creates light at night, that it wouldn't spill overtly onto other adjacent properties. And this is what they call a photometric plan. And what it does is it shows as far as what's proposed for exterior lighting locations, fixtures, lightness of the bulbs that are proposed, of what the brightness would be at various points from those light points. Put that up close, you'd see that the numbers as they go towards the property perimeter is diminishing towards 0, and that's what we're looking for on a photometric plan. It's proving that the light will be minimal to none at the property. Therefore, it's not a light pollution issue. So this one's met. Next slide. When we get on to the landscaping and the screening portion, next slide. Really, the only issue there was the types of streetscape is type A through the zoning ordinance, and that would be in the front there. It's applicable on public roads, which Goodman Road is obviously a public road, and it requires major shade trees to be planted. They weren't really proposing any of those. They've actually got 3 proposed major shade trees on the west side, which actually aren't required. And what they've done from last month is they've stepped up the number of ornamental trees in the front. I think last month it was either 2 or 3 trees with the orange circles there in the front. So in summary here is we've got a possible motion by the Planning Commission. If you recommend approval, there are a few that would need to be addressed. Number 1, revise the required 5 to 12 pitch requirement for the roof, or rule on a request if it's made by the applicant to deviate from the design standards via a design exception to state why the standard cannot be met using Article 13, Item K1, A through C of the city's zoning ordinance. Number 2, clarify the south side plantings to meet the city standards or get approval by the Planning Commission as submitted. And then number 3, they are doing a sidewalk through the plat, but I always like to just make sure it's always in there. So the applicant and the public doesn't forget, that would be to provide the south side sidewalk to meet city standards. So that would be in the staff presentation unless you have any questions.
Are there any questions by the board? Mr. Barr? No questions by the board. Can we have the applicant step forward, state your name and address?
I'm Matt Wolf with ETI Corporation, 1755 Linfield, Memphis, 381. We resubmitted updated plans. We've got a modular building that's being elevated basically on a traditional foundation above the flood elevation according with code and for us. Also brought a representative of the modular company as well to help with any questions.
I think it was tabled for the, for updated drawings, right?
Yeah.
Did anybody have any questions about those drawings? In the package?
Maybe I missed it, but what's the outside of the building? What's the metal brick? So, oh,
My name's Adam Brown. I'm the property engineer.
is it a tin roof?
It's a flat roof. It is a metal roof, and it is atypical for modular buildings to have a center pitch roof. We plan on putting a parapet in the front. We've been wrapping it around 10 foot on the east and west. So just kind of help make it more aesthetically pleasing.
Idea of that.
Are you okay with revised to meet the 512 pitch standard request? City standards? Yes, sir.
I think we were looking for a parapet at 20%. Right, first code. Looking to see flat roof.
Mr. Barr, is it okay if they, we have to just make a variance to the roof?
Good question, Chairman or Vice Chair. Yeah, per the city code on the design standards on the roof, I mean, right out the box, it basically says at least the 5 to 12 pitch, but it also says if that can't be met, that they can propose a combination of some type of pitch and parapet that would be, would be acceptable as a design for the roof. So per the wording of the design standards, a parapet can be acceptable in the design.
Recognize Chairman Yeager.
What would cause you to decide to go with that option instead of a 5 to 12 degree pitch?
The way they're made in the factory, it's just not 6 feet high built. So they come up on a slope and have all the it is technically still slightly pitched.
So what you're saying is you'll have a 6,000 square foot building, perfectly square, flat roof with kind of gutters on the side?
Right, well it's got J channels, scuppers.
Yeah. I understand. So you're like at a 2 degree pitch?
Right, I mean it's a small, it's not completely flat.
I got you. I understand.
So I say flat, well it's flat, flat. This is going to be a proposed flat roof. According to the roof requirements. It'll have a small pitch to channel the water. It would be considered a flat roof. A standard is without reaching the roof. 5, 12, 12, 12. We go by engineers and planning. We're the largest growing.
said that there was gonna be like a 2-inch.
1 inch per each 125 inches.
No, I can't find anywhere in the 1 inch. All I saw was quarter 12 and 5/12.
This
It's
will
only
be
two figures. You got a certain page or something that's got 2 inches on it somewhere?
Well, this is a flat roof. Roof requirements. Pitch roof, inside roof, flat. Flat roof. That's all they're there for. Right, under the flat roof, you should be access building 1, 3, 125.
Is this a stick built or a pre-manufactured building?
Sorry?
Is this a stick built or pre-manufactured?
Manufactured in the factory.
So it's going to be a modular unit that you're going to put in there, then you can put a roof on it.
Well, we bring 6 together. It's a 6-place. All together. Bring the side around, airfill on top. Slick wood in the building. It doesn't look like a trailer. It's not a building. Maybe 3 stories tall, 3 stories. Modular building. A lot of times we can tell this is not modular building.
So you're basically asking for a variance from the 512 pitch, correct?
Correct.
If you give that variance, it's gonna be a flat roof. When somebody else comes in and wants a flat roof, you're gonna have to allow a building with a flat roof. So why can't they move this from the side of the roof?
I'm not taking their side.
You know what I'm saying?
That's standard. Well, it carries water. You're supposed to anyway, isn't it?
Right.
That's what the plumbing pipe does. It carries water.
Right, at a certain rate.
Given that pitch so that it will continue.
Correct. Same thing. It's not perfectly
Well, why can't
flat.
you,
It's not
why can't
level.
you just give us
We're
an
getting
answer
level
of what
flat.
it's going to be? If it's going to be 1 inch, say 1 inch. If it's going to be 5 inches, it's going to be 5 inches.
I can give you an exact amount. But consider it's a regular 1 inch. 5 feet.
I'm,
I can slice that
5 feet.
1 inch long. 25 feet.
Your roof is only going to be about, what, 30, 40 feet?
That's a slope. Basic slope. What's the deal? It's intentionally built like this to channel water. It's not, I say flat, it's not level.
Let me,
Have is all slope. They're made like this.
let me recognize Mr. Barr at the time.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is by definition, it's considered a flat roof, but it does have a certain amount of pitch, and when you, that numbers that you give, when you run it out, ends up being that quarter to 12 type slope. Not quite that much. Okay, so it's kind of rounded to that. Okay. Okay, thank you. If I may read in lowercase a, number 1, what it says is for roof requirements, letter A, it says pitched roofs, then a little 1 tick, says all one-story buildings less than 10,000 square feet, this is like, what, around 6,000 or so, must have a pitched roof between 5 to 12 and 12 to 12 as much as possible. If a pitch roof is not possible, a combination of it talks about the parapet type design to kind of help compensate on the design. So that's the actual wording from the design standard of the city.
are, so I can conclude from what you just read that they are in compliance with the code.
Yes, if they want to do the parapet, that would be something. I mean, obviously they're not proposing at least a 5 to 12 or even steeper than that for pitch. But then they would be doing the parapet along the front, and then it sounds like they'd also be doing a slight parapet around the corners on both the east side and on the west side of the proposed building. And so, yeah, to me, the staff deems that as technically meeting the code.
And they had submitted that to the property.
Yes, yes. So that's what the new design that you've got here is showing that. It also shows, so we've tried to, as far as what they've updated and submitted as far as new plans per last month, that's been put in your monthly packets and then also in the PowerPoint as well.
So am I correct, assuming that our item number 1 is satisfied, or item number 1 on this proposed motion is satisfied with regard to the roof?
In my opinion, I believe it is now.
Okay, any more questions for the applicant? Do we have a motion?
Southside planting situation with regard to the trees has been satisfied also.
Well, good question on the landscaping. The actual landscaping requires, because it's streetscape type A, I believe it's requires 2 large shade trees on the south side. And what they've chosen to do is put 3 on the west side, and there's actually none that are required on the west side. And what they've done is they've beefed up or increased the numbers on the front of the ornamental trees. So they're up to 5 now proposed in the front. And then we've got the 3 major trees on the west side. So, and then the streetscapes planting formulas, if you will, they're only applicable on public roads. So in this case, the only thing to play is on the south side of the property, which is Goodman Road West. And so basically the question that's before the planning commission is it looks like they're altering, from the rigid formula of planting, if that's acceptable to the planning commission. Because actually what they're doing is they're doing more than what's required, but it's just in slightly different locations. So whether that balances it out in the planning commission's mind, or if you'd rather have the major shade trees in the front, and that would be up to your judgment.
Current ordinance wants the major shade trees to be the front. Sidewalk.
Any more questions?
Could we possibly flip that landscape reserve for 2 of the shade trees in the front and the rest on the side?
Any more questions? Have a motion.
After review of the application based on 2064 site plan.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Can we get a roll call?
Egner?
Yes.
Yeager?
Yes.
Dow? Yes. Stokes?
Yes.
Little? Yes. Mercer?
I'm gonna say if it's suitable with the road, you go to the county contract. I think it's particularly more, and it lasts a lot longer. And I got one question I want to ask you.
We're in the motion now, Mr. We're in motion. So yes, no?
Yes.
Motion passed 6 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. You're welcome. Now we have case 2086, site plan design review for proposed light industrial outbuilding at 1887 Sheraton Drive. Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, this is case 2086. And this is under old business because this actually came into the department last year as an application. I think it was in either October or November. And there was various things that needed to be worked out with the application itself, and those have taken some time. And therefore, that's why it's considered old business, even though you may not have seen it for a long time. Design review. So if you could go to the next slide there, Dan, please. Thank you. So I'm going to spend a little time on this particular slide. The subject property is already developed with the building located on its northern portion and is used in a light industrial capacity. It is located in the J.E. Sartain Commercial Second Revised Subdivision. That was recorded in September of 2007. There is floodway located on the eastern third of the property, which this particular map, if you can make that out, I've tried to indicate that with that light brown color. This is basically just a snapshot from the DeSoto County GIS of the subject property and the floodplain in the area. And so that's about the eastern third of the property from north to south. And then about another second third of the property, maybe slightly more, is designated as 100-year floodplain. On this particular map, that's shown with like the reddish pink yellow color, and that's more in the southwest corner of the property. And then there's the very southwest corner of the property, which is free and clear of any of floodplain designation whatsoever. So you see the subject. Oh, okay. Yeah, you can see the subject property there. If you go back. Yeah, there, yeah, the subject property was highlighted in blue box. I should have said that first. Sorry about that. Okay, next slide. So yeah, what's proposed here is a new building in the southwest corner. It's 6,250 square feet enclosed with 1,250 square feet just under roof, but not public water and sanitary sewer. Both are provided by the Horn Lake Water Association. Gas is Atmos Energy, and electricity is Entergy Mississippi Incorporated. Next slide. So a couple field photos, if you will. This one here is looking southeast at the west property line. You can see the existing building already there. You can see some parking that they use, and the building would be back in the, kind of before those trees there in the back, if you will. So next slide. This one here is from the subject property. It's looking south on the west side of it. And then if you can kind of imagine back in the corner there, way in the back, that's where the proposed building will be located. So as we had in the last presentation, we've got this kind of a, I call placeholder. This talks about why we have architectural standards for the city. Next slide. So here's some of the issues. Number one, on the mechanical systems, none were really shown, or at least I could find in the drawings. So a remedy for that would be to provide in the revised drawings, of course we have from Public Street View, which would be Sartain Drive. Number two, which is highlighted on the map, or excuse me, on the diagram there, would be like what we just talked about, would be the pitch requirement, which we just talked about. The city has that 5 to 12 minimum pitch. Or if they would like, we could ask for a design standard exception. Then number three, but not shown on this slide, is the dumpster enclosures that show where those would be at, and they'll have to be screened with material that's similar to the building material that's already on the property or what's proposed. Site plan review slide. Next slide. Again, the site plan if approved is good for 1 year. Next slide. So this is the slide is showing the actual site plan design. The new building location is down in that southwest corner of the property. It's highlighted in the orange color inside the pink box, if you will, or the pink line. They're showing the parking, existing parking areas in the northwest corner of the subject property, and the existing building is the dark gray color. If you go back there, Dan. All right. Issue number one is APA compliant parking standards. In the site plan, they didn't show any handicap. They only have to provide one, or I guess either one or two of handicap spaces as far as number. Number two, vehicular area shall be a sealed surface construction as per the zoning ordinance. The back vehicular area is proposed to be in gravel surface, not sealed. Revised to meet or ask for design exception there. Number three, stormwater management plan reviewed and approved by the city engineer. Remedy would be abide by drainage requirements made by the city engineer, if he has any. Number four, buffer yard requirements. The buffer yard type 40 is required along the west side and south sides of the property due to the A-R, which is the agricultural residential type zoning adjacent to the subject parcels. So as you can see there, I've tried to label the AR zoning, which is on the west and the south. And then the remedy here would be, it's motioning that with the existing tree rows on the west and south side. So staff is recommending a condition to keep the existing screening in place. What's there now is just basically, it looks like volunteer type trees that have grown up over the years. It doesn't really adhere to the strict formula that the city has for planting, but it does provide, if you remember from the field photos, effective screening for the property that's located to the west. Next slide. So we'll go to the next slide. So streetscape type A for the west side, it's not entirely applicable because the road, the public road, comes basically to a terminus at the opening or the entrance point to the subject property. The applicant is proposing to provide some plantings along that northwest corner, and I've tried to highlight there holly and then dwarf Japanese holly along the property's northwest side. There's no real issue here, but just noting what is proposed by the applicant. Number two, the interior lot landscaping. If you remember the zoning requirements require at least 20% of a property, the interior of it to be landscaped. And what I estimate is what's proposed is about 40%. So that standard is met and exceeded. Next slide. So a possible motion by the Planning Commission is for approval of the site plan design review on the 2.55 acres for this proposed light industrial building. But there's a few conditions attached to that. Number one, revised plans to show mechanical systems and said systems must be screened. Number two, revised roof pitch to meet the 512 standard of review. Or I think you should say, or review a design exception request from applicant if requested. Number three, revised plans to show dumpster, and it must be same code, i.e. brick, stucco, split face block, or building material that is similar to the principal building. Number four, revised plans to show ADA compliant handicap parking. Number five, show back parking lot with sealed surface or consider a request by applicant for a design exception if requested. Number six, drainage plans must be reviewed and approved by the city engineer and build any improvements according to that. And number seven, have property owner maintain existing screening along west and south property lines to keep as an effective buffer yard. And I would conclude the presentation by sharing questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Barr?
Just questions for that.
Mr. Barr, is any of this building in the floodplain?
Very good question, thank you. If I remember right, they've basically put it just like the very like east side. So they have done their due diligence there as far as locating those elevation marks, and then trying to plan where it'll be outside of that. So that's a good thing.
My question, is the applicant aware of these requirements or recommendations?
Yes, Commissioner Bedell, we have made those aware to the applicant. They are aware of that.
Any more questions for Mr. Barr?
I think I remember in the discussions with them, I think they were mostly in agreement with them, but if you would like to ask them specifically or if they've had any changes or change of thoughts, so that's a completely fair question.
All right, to the applicants, can we get your name and address?
David Upchurch, 1887 Salt Lake.
So that's your name on all your buildings.
And I'm Jonathan Hooker. I'm with ARC Architects in Hernando, 342 West Valley Street.
Okay. Any questions for the applicants?
Yes. Can you explain recommendation 1 to 7? What have you done and how are you meeting these requirements?
The plumbing and HVAC company, and this is mainly location for their plumbing company. So they've had issues over the years. They have a lot of these water tank trucks that freeze sitting outside. So this building is just to store trucks to keep them out of the elements. There's no occupants going in the building. There's no bathroom or anything like that. It's literally for someone to back the truck in and keep it over the winter. They're not going to use the building for anything other than that. There's no maintenance or anything going on. So we proposed a metal building because it's what's on their existing site to be purchased building for any a few buildings in the same area. So it fits with the exact style and design of the building. I think the only really exceptions we're looking for as far as on the 1 through 7 is obviously the roof is a 1.5 12 pitch instead of a 5 12 pitch. We're proposing a metal building, which is the exact style of the building next door and his property. And industry standard, they don't typically make a metal building that high of a pitch. It would be, custom made, or you'd have to go to a stick frame building or a wood building. And he would like to stick to metal building just to keep it similar to his property. He'd like to paint the outside just like his other buildings and a trim on that. And then the other exception we're looking for is the limestone in the back of the property. We are adding additional concrete and additional parking, and we will comply with the ADA spot. But with these big trucks on the property, they tear up concrete or asphalt or anything put down. So the back of the property, he's really using it as a storage yard for his larger water tank trucks. So that's why we're proposing limestone instead of a hard surface concrete or asphalt, just because he's worried over time that would crack and tear up even more than the limestone would have.
In the front of the building, that's asphalt, right?
Concrete.
Concrete,
And
okay.
what we're adding back is some additional concrete. We're adding about 12, 15 additional concrete on the side.
And it really didn't have any feet back there that you did there. Again, it's behind the building in the trees. It's just with this big warehouse.
Any more questions for that? Do I have a motion?
So you're not going to seal or surface the entire back wall?
Behind where the existing building is, or in front of the existing building, is putting new concrete. But behind that, he's keeping just regular limestone, which you typically don't seal or anything.
So you're going to ask for
Or an exception. Part of that is, like I said, he could pave it, but with that heavy of a load of trucks, it's going to tear up in a few years and have weeds growing through. It's going to
Well,
my only question is, why would it tear up the concrete in the back if it's not going to take it front?
I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair. Steel, asphalt, like that. But you've got the line in the back. Now, let's hold that there.
Yeah, I drove over there Saturday and I couldn't see back there. My point of view is very
Yeah, it's about all you can see.
I couldn't see back there.
And we're adding some plants over that.
So as far as what the building looks like, on the pitch of the roof, that you think the truck's going to tear up the concrete back here when they tear up the concrete in the front?
A hard surface, no matter what you do over time, it's going to tear up. Especially if the heavier trucks turning their wheels, they're going to tear
So
up.
it's just going to save you a lot of money.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And compared to
How long have you been in that building?
we bought personally at 1792 back in 02. Second building, 2 years later, we bought proposed was discussed on May 13th. This is part time.
More questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll motion. I recommend, after review of application case number 2086, a site plan design and landscape review request of light industrial shop use of 1887 Sarton Drive consisting of 2.55 acres on land that is zoned M1. The Hornet Planning Commission approves the request of the following conditions 1 through 7, with the exception of the laid limestone instead of concrete in the back.
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Janice. Need a roll call? Go ahead. Is there any discussion?
Because we also need to make an amendment where it's going to be 1.5.
Right.
So,
Okay. We still have a second by you, Ms. Janice?
Yes.
Can we get a roll call?
Egner,
Yes.
Yeager,
Yes.
Udall,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Little, yes. Mercer,
Motion passed 6-0 approved. Thank you. Mr. Upchurch. Finally, new business. All right, let's go to case number 2083, request for a conditional use for a semi-truck parking land use to be located at 6667 Pasadena Drive and Horn Lake. Mr. Barr.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so now we're shifting gears, if you will. No pun intended, really. This is a conditional use, so they're basically requesting, if ultimately approved by the Board of Aldermen, they would gain the property rights, in this case, to park the semi-trucks in a property on a permanent or intermittent basis. They would need the conditional use. That's the case before you tonight.
Mr. Barr?
No, I'm just turning the
Oh,
page.
okay.
Sorry.
Like, hold on, Mr. Barr.
So now, as we've seen before, through Article 10, applications, letter C, when it deals with conditional uses, there's prescribed in the zoning ordinance 6 factors, if you will, that the Planning Commission needs to consider when they have a request before them. And so we'll be going through those 6 items here. And so let's go to the next slide there again. So here we see the property layout or slash site plan as provided by the applicant of the area under there in the center. And I've tried to label the existing zoning in the area. It's M1 to the north, C4 to the east, and then it's also M1 to the west, and then off picture there to the south is RM-6. And this is for a new land use. Next slide. So then we dive into the individual 6 points. And so the first one is, will the proposed conditional use, A, substantially increase traffic hazards or congestions? And so a lot of this, just to make sure I don't leave anything out, I'll probably just read it verbatim. So hopefully that's okay. And so what's supplied by the applicant, the proposed use would be very similar in character to the existing use on site and to the properties to the east and northeast, which all appear to be used currently for vehicles directly to the east. Additionally, there are multiple industrial uses in the immediate vicinity, such as logistics center and distribution center, which utilize semi-trucks on site. Given the existing use of the site and surrounding ones, it is not anticipated that the proposed use will substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion, nor will it adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. So then we have a staff analysis. The applicant did perform a very thorough traffic analysis of the existing conditions and the anticipated traffic from the proposed land use. It's a 21-page report. It was included in your packet, and it is included. It's included in your packet. Part E, the conclusions from that report appears. his appears below. The use increases traffic, no doubt. The study shows turning left onto Goodman Road from Pasadena Drive is already a poor level of quality, and adding more trucks turning there every day would make things worse. One thing I want to add to kind of explain a traffic study or levels of service. I don't know if you saw that in the traffic study. Think of it as, go back to like high school days or perhaps college days, and of course you get letter grades. You got A, B, C, D, and then you go to F, for failure. So with levels of service in transportation planning, you have A, B, C, D, but you also have a level E and then F. F still pretty much stands for failure. It's a failed, unacceptable level of service letter. Next slide. So what you'll see, well, we'll see it later. I'll go back to that. But okay, now letter B, supplied by the applicant, substantially increased fire hazards. There will be no storage of hazardous materials on site due to the nature of the use. Thus, the use will not substantially increase fire hazards. Staff analysis is that the applicant claims there will be no storage of hazardous materials on the site. But what about in the stored trailers to the trucks? How will they know, and how could that be regulated? Is that a concern of the Planning Commission? Letter C, adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. Supplied by the applicant, the proposed use would be very similar in character to the existing use on site and of the properties to the east, northeast, which all appear to be used currently for vehicles and or equipment storage purposes. There appears to be a semi-truck storage yard on the property directly to the east. Additionally, there are multiple industrial uses in the immediate vicinity, such as a logistics center and distribution center, which utilize semi-trucks on site. So that wording is identical to what was supplied earlier. Let's see. The current conditions and character of surrounding uses in the area. It is a desirable use in the context of the surrounding industrial uses and the proximity to Memphis and the nearby interstate highway system not have a detrimental impact on surrounding or nearby property values. So we have staff analysis, which starts on the next slide. So the subject property is located in an area of the city that is zoned M1 to the north and west of the subject property, and then zone C4 to the east of the subject property, and then RM6 to the south of the subject property. Land uses include the following in relation to the subject property: north, various light industrial, intensive commercial with car auction lot; south, and mid-sized, at least what I would characterize as a mid-sized drainage pond to the west. Trees along the subject's property southeast, east, and southwest sides help to effectively screen the parcel from most of the other parcels in the area. In all, the requested land use in the form of a conditional use appears to be a good fit and location within the city. Next slide. Letter D asks the question, adversely affect the general welfare of the city, supplied by the applicant. As described above, the applicant proposes a development that is in keeping with the public health, safety, and welfare, and is not detrimental or injurious to the surrounding properties as it planned land use in the proposed land use map, comprehensive plan for Horn Lake, Mississippi. Finally, given the importance of servicing and maintaining manufacturing, distribution, and logistics centers and supplying a more functional supply chain, permitting semi-truck parking in such convenient location represents responsible growth and development in this area. So then we go on to staff analysis. The largest concern staff has is the added truck traffic through the area and the flow of it. But this must be weighed against the overall need for semi-truck parking as a land use within the city itself. Code enforcement and the planning department constantly deal with a week-to-week reality that there are a limited number of existing legal places within the city to park semi-trucks. In essence, these two entities chase the land use of parking semi-trucks placed and designed property within the city of Horn Lake. Though not specifically specified in the city's comprehensive plan, citizens, city staff, and others, the land use is a high priority that needs fully fulfilled and attention. In my opinion, it can't really happen soon enough, so you just have to weigh it's the right scale, it's the right amount of conditions. added to it. Now we go on to the letter E, overtax public utilities or community facilities supplied by the applicant. The proposed use will have minimal demand on public utilities since it will not contain facilities that promote a high usage of any of water, sewer, or electrical service. Additionally, the existing impervious footprint is proposed to be maintained. Thus, this proposed development will not damage of the surrounding area and public stormwater infrastructure. Staff analysis, the requested land use should not overtax the public utility systems supplying it or community facilities. In a way, it is a good and that the paved area the proposed use would be utilizing is already in place, thus giving the community a real-world experience of so much paving being in place. So, location section of the plan, page 19, it says the following: provide for a safe, convenient, and efficient transportation system which accommodates all modes of travel with sufficient capacity to accommodate the present and future transportation needs of the city. I've got here, this is a tall order and is tested by this request. The supplied impact study, TIS, is absolutely necessary and it tells us a lot. Of course, it verifies that both that Highway 51 North and Goodman Road West near the subject property are heavily trafficked areas with average daily traffic of around 15,000 vehicles per day, which would be for the Highway 51 North, and 35,000 vehicles per day, respectively. That would be for Goodman Road. Existing conditions point to poor turn times for traffic turning from Pasadena Drive to Goodman Road. This leads to further increased wait times to make turns onto Goodman Road, and it takes more nerves and patience testing of all drivers, especially truck drivers, where their turn times take more to move the length of these larger and longer vehicles. That's what I'm trying to say. Next slide. Transportation continued. The conclusion from the traffic import study report is the following, though. When complete, the development is expected to generate a total of 29 trips, 13 entering and 16 exiting during the AM peak hour, and 26 trips, 11 entering and 15 exiting during the PM peak hour. This is continued wording right from the traffic study. Overall traffic operations at the study intersections operated acceptable levels of service, that LOS, during the AM and peak MP hours, except for the northbound and southbound Route 302 at Pasadena Drive. The northbound approach, shared lane movements are operating at level of service E and level of service F in the AM and PM peak hours, respectively. So basically, they're already at near or failing levels already. Traffic operations are expected to worsen as evidence in the no-build conditions due to the anticipated growth in the study area. So basically they're saying they're anticipating more traffic to the city in general over time. Still continuing on, let's see. The addition of project traffic is expected to have minimal of service and delays at the study intersection when compared to 2023 no-build conditions. However, the northbound and southbound approaches at Goodman Road West and Pasadena Drive continue to operate at level of service F. Minor approach queuing is expected to be less than 70 feet. It is noted that only 5 and 4 project trips are added to the northbound approach in the AM and PM peak hours, which is a nominal amount. Based on analysis prepared for the proposed development, additional improvements to existing roadway and traffic control conditions are not required to mitigate the impact of the proposed development. The number 4 there, as far as one of the parts of the comp plan, nothing specific here under community facilities in support or against the proposed land use in this section of the plan. Next slide. So a possible motion supplied here for approval of the request, but with the following conditions attached. Number 1, The owner slash applicant shall bond to the city amounts to maintain the quality of Pasadena Drive and Dancy Boulevard based upon the expected type and number of vehicle traveling on those two roads to and from the requested land use amount to be determined by city engineering. Number 2, emergency action plan to satisfy the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency, which is MEMA, because the property is located within a 100-year designated floodplain. Even though parts of it have been elevated. Going on to number 3, the owner applicant shall maintain current presence of trees to effectively screen the land use from visibility from U.S. Highway 51 and properties located south of the subject property. Number 4, the owner applicant shall install a drainage effluent collection system along the property's west side to collect runoff from the parking lot. There's anticipations from the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality coming to all of the jurisdictions in the state potentially sometime next year. Just trying to actually get out in front of that from a clear presentation unless you have any questions.
Mr. Morgan, what options could be suggested when it comes to the traffic heading suggestions?
Very, very good question. I mean, obviously, the traffic study came to the conclusion that it didn't feel that any were necessary. One of the bad things, at least in my opinion, professionally speaking, with traffic studies, lots of times they say about the same thing. Not always. Sometimes they'll call out something specific, let's say like a turn lane is needed or enhanced signage or enhanced, just like traffic lights are needed or something in a particular area. But lots of times what happens, it says, is you add traffic, but it's basically not proverbially the straw that breaks the camel's back from a transportation perspective. I didn't get any input from the city engineer, and so this case has been a struggle for me because I feel like I'm planning in a vacuum on this one because to me it's a big, important question, and it's a use that I think is needed in town, and it seems like it'd be a pretty good location. But from a planning perspective, I am concerned about the volumes that it would create. Right now, I don't have any suggestions. I don't know if it goes to the alderman level, that there would be discussions as far as improvements to some of the traffic there. I mean, if I think about, let's say, like Pasadena Drive goes to the north, goes up to Goodman Road, which is also 302. You say, well, maybe add a stoplight there or whatever, but then you've got issues moving to the east as you go towards, quote, Bullfrog Corner, because then you might have some delay there or whatever. So yeah, it does add traffic to the area, and it's going to be traffic. It's not passenger vehicles. It's what's proposed basically through the request is up to like the storage of 450 semi-trucks to be parked there, and that's a very high number. But the applicant has been really good to work with. I think they're open to the conditions, and I've tried to make those apparent to the applicant. And so at this point, I don't have any hard suggestions as far as, increase the traffic signalization at this corner or this intersection. I don't have anything as a suggestion.
Did the traffic, I don't see it in the traffic study, but did they say anything about the train track delays plus that? I mean, trains don't come through often, but how would that impact those trucks coming on 302?
I don't recall that being addressed in the traffic impact study, but I'm not saying that it wasn't. I'd have to go back and look at it. It's a very good question.
Any other questions from the board?
Addressing question 2. Is it the same for residential as it is for commercial property to build 2 feet above the floodplain? What is the requirement?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. What the standard is through the city's floodplain regulations is if someone's building and let's say it's a structure, they would have to elevate 2 feet. I mean, most parts of the country usually have what they call 1 foot of a base flood freeboard. It's called freeboard to go 1 foot above the base flood elevation level. So, and so that's where that EAP came from MEMA, is that they're concerned that they would like to have an emergency action plan as supplied by the landowner for the removal of all things that are parked there. So if we have the idea, the concept is that, okay, we're anticipating, a big rain event. We know we can predict it, through weather forecasts, that sort of thing, that they have the ability to, as far as even if the driver of the truck is not around, they have ability to move those trucks in due time. The applicant has suggested that they would put that on each individual truck person, and then we have like 450 individual emergency action plans. The staff were not really too thrilled with trying to keep track of 450 emergency action plans. We'd rather just have one, and so that's. But NEMA was very clear with us. For the use to go first, they need that emergency action plan by the owner, because they don't want in a flood event to have all these semi trucks, floating away or floating down the area and causing flood damage.
My next question is, so how are you going to ensure, are they going to supply you with this plan, or are they going to send it to you? How are you going to keep up with that?
They would have to come up with a plan, and then we would review it, and we would forward it on to NEMA, and they would look at it to see whatever they're specifically looking for. There's probably a few things that they're looking for as far as timeliness, notification, ability to communicate between the owners of the trucks or whoever placed the truck there on the lot, and the ability to move them in a timely manner as far as, meets their threshold, if you will, of acceptability for an EAP.
So if they are not able to do this today and going forward, they really don't have any plan. We don't know of a plan. We don't know if they'll have a plan. So.
Well, excuse me. What I'm thinking is if it's in the Planning Commission's mind, if you want to recommend, approval, I would. The EAP condition really needs to be attached. As far as the substance of it, that would have to be determined by the applicant at a later date, and then it would have to meet NEMA's standards, whatever they're looking for specifically, and then they'll either approve it or reject it, or they'll ask for a revision.
So if we motion this tonight and we approve it with recommendations,
Basically, it would only come back to you, as let's say that from here, let's say if you recommended approval or denial or approval with conditions, if the alderman wanted to send it back as far as like under further review of something specific, they can do that. The governing body can do that. They can send it back to the planning commission and say, ask for further study on X or XYZ or whatever it would be. So I don't necessarily see it coming back, but that always is an option that could come on.
any more questions from Mr. Barr? Is the applicant here? You did all that with that.
The person I've been working with as far as the applicant, his name is A.J. Carlasudo. He's with a particular company. And I'd sent him an electronic Zoom connection prior to the meeting, because I don't know if he's listening in.
Is he?
Is?
He's on
He's on
Zoom. Can he hear us? Well, I'm speaking here. Can
What's his name?
he speak with us?
AJ?
Is AJ local?
Can you hear us?
Well, he probably can hear us, but the question is, can he speak back? Of course, he would have to unmute. Okay, Mr. Barr.
I got a question.
So if we table this,
Director Barr, I have some questions for you as well. Questions you may not know. I was really hoping you was here. Is this a drop lot that's going to be secure? Is it gated, camera? Do we know anything?
That's a very good question. There is some fencing to the property now that's in place. Whether that would be sufficient in your mind or the alderman's mind, I'm not sure. I know that one of the other communities in the area. They're considering a similar type use. And I think they're going with the idea of like an on-site kind of a custodial security trailer. I don't know if that would be of your liking or preference. Obviously, that's a very good question for the applicant if they were here, if they were able to address that. Because I think security is of utmost concern here.
The second question I had is that, you said your traffic study, it was on more of a forward grade, especially because Goodman Road. If you knocked out the one suggestion altogether and just have them turn on 51 all the time, would that be on 51?
Yeah, I don't know if we could make that a condition, because I don't know how anyway we would enforce it or whatever. I mean, I think the truck drivers over time, whether that still would be an acceptable level of safety and service, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to point out too that Goodman Road, we all know Goodman Road's bad, especially during peak hours and Saturdays. With their proposed turns into and out of Goodman Road, that's 2 to 2.5 feet per minute. Well, it's like a truck every 2 to 2.5 minutes. So that's a lot of turns. And we already have road rage coming up here. I mean, we have people backed up all the way to the interstate going west. It's bad. So I'm on a fan based on that.
Those are very good concerns and questions. One thing that I'm just going to throw the idea out there. I don't know if it'd be acceptable. I haven't talked with the representative. The representative who's out of Atlanta, Georgia, this A.J. Colacerdo, is limiting the number of vehicles instead of going with their full. They're suggesting 450, but maybe there's some other number less that would still be viable for them, but would be more acceptable from a traffic level of service perspective.
I would just like to talk to them. I mean, I have so many questions for them. I work in transportation. It's a great idea of this.
All right. Due to the many questions that'll be, you have one for Mr. Barr?
Yes. Mr. Barr, would it be possible for us to recommend that they enter and exit on 51 only? I don't know, because that's the more plausible.
But then you're backing up the turn lane going.
That's what I think.
I mentioned the condition or whatever.
It stick around.
Yeah, so how we,
Especially during peak hours.
Right.
I'm trying to think of turn lane.
We have a sign, all semi-trucks go this way.
yeah, we almost have to say that.
Well, you have to take this with a grain of salt. Truck drivers aren't leaving out except for everybody has common sense. Truck drivers leave out at nighttime, on Sundays, when traffic's not bad, because they don't want traffic. We don't want traffic. Just take that with a grain of salt. Now, granted, will there be one? Yes. All of them, no. I understand your point.
Well, I'm just going based on what they're saying here
Right.
in their study.
Well,
Okay.
I'm just going based on what the numbers are saying.
Now, let me make a suggestion to everybody that we see if we can get the applicant for the next meeting, either online or in person, and we table it until then. So, would anybody like to make that motion?
Case number 2083 until our next meeting in July, so that we can discuss.
or Zoom or in person, either way.
Zoom or person.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion?
Second.
Oh, Mr. Egnor already did second. Do we have any discussion? Roll call.
Yes.
Duval?
Yes.
Stokes?
Yes.
Little? Yes. Mercer?
Motion to table passed 5, none opposed. It'll be tabled till the meeting in July. Case number 2085. Request for a final plat of a minor subdivision named The Fountains and Fair Meadows, PD Section K, at this time be located at 4033.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're for a proposed Yes, for proposed dental office on 1.23 acres at the 4033 Fountain Lane. Now, that's an unofficial address, it hasn't been assigned, but that's a likely address number to help people cite the location. Next slide, please. So what we have here is, excuse me, since this is a final plat, the city has in its subdivision regulations basically two different types of subdivisions. One is a minor subdivision and one is a major. In this particular case, it's a minor subdivision. And then there's two steps that could be taken in the review of a minor subdivision. One's called a sketch plat, and then the other is the final plat. In this particular case, the sketch plat has been omitted, basically, trying to expedite the case, if you will. Basically, the final plat is your first look at the final plat here before you tonight. Next slide. This slide basically reiterates what I just spoke. All right. So here on this slide here we have the final plat layout. As I stated earlier, it's proposed at 1.23 acres. You'll notice on the west side of the area that's proposed to be platted, which is highlighted with the kind of the navy blue or bright blue line, that the ingress and egress easement is 0.21 acres of the total amount or total area. The proposed number of lots is just one. None of the property in question is located in the 100-year designated floodplain. No new public road is proposed. As far as Falls Water Association, for sanitary sewer, that would be the city, I need to change this slide. This is the same. This is City of Horn Lake Water Association, so I have to go back to my case notes to see if it's the city or if it's actually the Horn Lake Water Association. Okay, thank you. Then number 7, the zoning is PUD, the planned unit development in a commercial manner. This is more of a close-up of the layout. Subject property highlighted in the blue. You can see the proposed ingress-egress easement on the west side, and then utility easements on the west, south, and east sides. You can see Fountain Lane on the north. And then there's a detention area that's proposed on the east side, and you can see Horn Lake Road going farther on the right side of the slide. The next slide. So from Article 3 of the subdivision regulations, we've got section 34-60 where it talks about lot arrangement. Design shall be such that it provides satisfactory living sites. And so from the plat, it shows a single end resulting lot at about 227 feet wide and about 201 feet deep. The plat also shows the properly required sides of the subject property. So staff analysis of that is the lot appears to provide a satisfactory and desirable building site with that size that was mentioned and with the necessary easements. And it would be for a proposed dental office in a modern type of building with necessary landscape. Next slide. Also from the subdivision regulations is section 34-62. It has to do with general suitability. I like to think of this as kind of it's like a double check on the zoning, if you will, to see if, as far as the plat itself, as far as what's proposed would be suitable, either in size or shape or location, and the existing zoning and land uses around it. So it says here the Planning Commission may reject a subdivision if it has been determined that the proposed subdivision is not in keeping with the general character of the development in the area. So what we've got here is, from the plat, the final plat is a commercial plat in an area of commercial zoning to the subject properties east and west, and then residential type zoning across Horn Lake Road to the east, and then residential land use is located south of the subject property. So it's a positive feature that about 50% of the properties in the area are commercial in nature. In essence, the subject property is in a commercial area that's developing in Horn. Now, this goes more to specific standards as found in the subdivision regulations. Here we've got section 34-89 as far as minimum standards. This talks about the sidewalks. And originally, there was no sidewalk proposed. We've actually gotten an updated drawing after the Planning Commission packets were delivered that is showing a sidewalk as proposed on the north side, I believe the west side, not in the road right away, but on the private property portion of the plat. So this one actually is positively seen as being met now. Next slide. So a possible motion here is for approval to the Board of Aldermen with two conditions attached. Complete all public improvements according to relevant city codes. I'd added this. There's been some. The city engineer wanted an easement for the pedestrian for the sidewalk. The city attorney said it was not. So I added B in there since the packets were developed and distributed to you. But at this point, as staff, I would take out B. I would not require a complete presentation unless you have any questions.
Do the board have any questions for Mr. Barr?
Can you explain again where exactly the sidewalks will be?
Oh, yes, thank you. Daniel, maybe if we go back to one of the, go forward one. Yeah, there you go. As far as the plat, the sidewalks, right now it would be west side, but not in the Fountain Lane, public road right away. It would actually be on private property.
Okay, and it says there's a retention pond on the east side.
Yeah, the detention pond is on the east side there.
Will there be some type of sidewalk down there? And I ask because we have a lot of pedestrians that walk up and down that road.
Are you speaking of the Horn Lake Road?
Yes.
Yeah. No, at this point, I don't think there's been any sidewalk proposed over there. As far as what I've seen, as far as a proposed sidewalk system, we would basically go along the north side of this site, then go across Fountain Lane, and it would go over to the proposed site for Wendy's along their along their south side, and then connect with Tidal Wave and then McDonald's going all the way around McDonald's on the south side and their west side. So that's what I've seen so far as basically a pedestrian or sidewalk system to this particular area of developed lot.
We'll have enough walking space so that they won't have to walk out onto the road, right? I mean, these are like school kids.
Yeah, as far as any of these walking areas, the sidewalks, the city requirement is 5 feet of width, and from what I've seen on all of the individual plats and related site plan designs, that they would be doing at least 5 feet on each one of these developable sites as far as the width of the sidewalk.
Well, what I was talking on the Horn Lake Road.
I haven't seen any sidewalks for Horn Lake
Well, no,
Road.
I'm not saying sidewalk, that we would have enough walking space for people so they wouldn't have to walk out the road if there's going to be drainage in that area.
Yeah, I'd have to look closer at to see if there would be any space there between Horn Lake Road in that right of way sidewalk, between that and like the detention pond.
Right, because we've got that hill right there, and there's going to be some bad things happen if we don't have enough for people to walk out of the road.
Yes, unless there's maybe perhaps go south on the south side of this site and then come around and then take them away from Horn Lake Road altogether. I don't know. That's just, I'm throwing out an idea just off the cuff.
Any more questions for Mr. Barr? All right. Any more questions, Mr. Barr? Can we have the applicant come up? Please give us your name and address, please.
Bill Brown, my office is 2540 Highway 51 South. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you again. This is going to be another great development and great improvement in this area of Horn Lake, just south of Alders. One very minor correction, what was said previously, the water is actually Walls Water Association, not Horn Lake Water Association. It's actually there. I drove by there, and I'm going to have a conversation with the people that I'm paying to cut the grass that has not been cut, so I will be on them tomorrow. what you will see in the end will be very much the same as what you see in front of all. This is not going to be a mess. Currently, it's a mess, but it won't be in the end. There should be adequate room to walk beside the detention area along One Lake Road. It's really not necessary. If you built a sidewalk currently, it would be a sidewalk, no hint. So I don't see, well, that's actually not on this lot either, by the way. I don't see where it would work. We actually looked at the possibility of doing a walking trail early in the process, and there were too many obstacles to go around for the walking trail. That was over on the common area in front of all. I wish it had worked. It just didn't work. Be happy to answer any other questions you have. There is a notation on the plat that the sidewalks are required for the city. You're about to hear sorry, I looked where Mr. Carr was. He wasn't there. You're about to hear Mr. Carr about site plan and so forth, so he could probably address some of those questions better. If you have any other questions.
Just a quick question out of curiosity. What is the building going to be? What is it?
It'll be a dental office.
Oh, dental.
Yeah, that's the next item on your agenda. And it is not Aspen Dental, but it is similar to Aspen Dental. They just bought, Aspen Dental just bought stuff on down to the corner of their way, some good ones, Valley, and work down. So, put together. It's some of the concepts.
What's your name again?
Bill Brown.
Bill Brown, I'm sorry. We ought to know it by now. Any more questions for Mr. Brown? All right. Still we want to hear from Mr.
Well, he's on the next item.
Oh, okay. No more questions?
Say something to Mr. Barr. Mr. Barr, I noticed you said we only have an A, which is complete, they have to meet complete all public improvement according to the relevant city code. So what would those be? Because that's very vague. I know you said they're putting in the sidewalk, that's on your complete. So what, you know?
At this point, the road is already in,
Okay.
and which is Fountain Lane. And one of the public improvements would be the sidewalk. I'm trying to think what else might be applicable. I'm running through my brain as far as like any street lights, or obviously, I think most of the mains for like sanitary sewer and water lines are there, so it would just be basically service extensions to the building itself. So that wouldn't necessarily constitute a public improvement, it would just be a private improvement. Sometimes I put those things in as a catch-all, just to make sure that if anybody ever
So
questions.
you want it to remain there?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And just one easement on Fountain Lane, right? That's no easement on One Lake Road? Or just easement into the family dental building?
Good question. As we'll see in the next case with the site plan, they're also proposing an access location up in the northeast corner of the property.
All right. Any more questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll note it. After review of application case number 2085, a request for the subdivision final plat of the one lot, 1.23 acres area named the County Industrial Meadows, PD, Section 2, for the commercial development of a dental office at 4033, address unofficial, the following condition. A, complete all public improvement according to relevant city code.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Who's gonna give it to? I don't know which one of y'all was fast. Who's second? Yeager. I think he was being a gentleman. Give it to Miss Little. Well, I'm gonna give it to Miss Little. He was being a gentleman. All right, any discussion? Can I get a roll call, please?
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Little, yes. Mercer?
All right, we have 6 for it and none opposed. Motion passed. All right, we're going to case, oh man, we almost at the end, yeah. 2084.
Yes, continuing on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is for the same property at that 4033 Fountain Lane, but this would be, instead of the plat, this would be the site plan design review, which we kind of started the evening off with a couple of those. So it's similar to that. Next slide. So then we have the architectural standards. We'll go into that next. Next slide, please. And so what you see here, I've put in here is this is an exterior rendering of the proposed building. It's in your packet and on slide there. Then we get to more specifics. So number one is the dumpster enclosures. Issue is to show the exterior materials of what they plan to use as the enclosure material. It must match or be to the building or of one of the acceptable materials through the city code. So let's see, the number two is the pitch roof. I couldn't quite tell if it meets. I mean, it's obviously a pitched roof. It looks real close to 512. If the architect or design person could comment on that to see if it's if it meets that or not. But I put it in there because I couldn't quite tell if it was 512 or thereabouts. The number three, the mechanical equipment would have to be screened from public street view. Of course, the requirement is 20% glass on public-facing facades. It comes in as proposed at 29%, so it meets and exceeds that glass building material standard. Next slide. This talks about site plan review and layout. Next slide, which is the 1-year approval. It's good for if you approve it tonight. Next slide. So this one here is showing the actual site plan as proposed by the applicant. And actually what they've done is, since this was delivered to you and this was created, they've actually got new diagrams that shows the proposed sidewalks, not in the right-of-way, but actually on private property, and they would be along the north side. I can see I got a pointer here. Yeah, they'd be kind of about right in this area here. And it would be turn the corner and on the west side. So it'd be not in the right-of-way, but it would be on private property. And they're showing it at 5 feet of width, which is the city standard, so that's good. So they're actually, in my opinion, meeting that. And we got landscaping and screening coming up. Next slide. Okay, number one here is streetscape type B for the north side of the property is applicable in this instance because that's the public road. They were a little bit deficient in the planting standards, and then since I've notified them, they've come back with a new design where they've beefed up the plantings along their shade trees. They've added that and some ornamentals. So actually what they've done since this was created, that they bumped up and they now will exceed the planting standard for the north side. Next slide. So in the end here, suggested motion or possible motion is to approve the request. And then let's see, so the conditions attached to it. One, revise to show materials to be used to screen the trash dumpster, clarify on the roof pitch, whether that's met or if it's going to be slightly under that, or if they add a parapet or something like that. Number three, revise to show location of the mechanical equipment. It must be screened from public road right away. They've actually, here I would strike number 4 off because in the new design they do show the sidewalks. And then I also would take off number 5 since they've bumped up their landscaping on the north side, so it now meets or exceeds streetscape type B. And then I would leave in number 6, which would become the new number 4, if you will, if the 2 were taken out. There was an engineering letter from Greg Russell from the Neil Schaefer Group dated from May the 27th. And there were 8 items. I don't believe that was attached in your packet, but I would have them address all the items that Mr. Russell has suggested. That would conclude the presentation unless you have any questions.
You said it was attached to our packet?
I don't think it was.
Okay. So you're saying when we do the motion 4 and 5, we can leave out? One,
Yes, as far as the ones that were proposed, like in your packet, you can leave off, I think it was
4, 5, and 6.
4 and 5, but still leave number 6. But if you delete 4 and 5, then number 6 actually becomes, from a numeric standpoint, number 4.
so we're looking at 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, 6 go to 4. Okay. Okay, so have all these been discussed, all these revised, they all been discussed with you? Have y'all already discussed all the revised?
Yes, yeah, the applicant's been really good to work with, and it just came in after the stuff was delivered, and so, yeah, they've done a good job meeting the planting standards, and, what was the other one? Oh, and adding the sidewalks to the site plan.
All these have already been agreed upon?
Well, the only thing I would need clarification as staff would be the roof. I don't know what obviously, it's got a pitch, I'm not sure exactly what that number is.
Okay. Okay, any more questions from Mr. Barr?
So we would need to verify the trash dumpster materials, this roof, and then the mechanical equipment location is correct.
All right, no more questions, Mr. Barr? Can we have the applicant?
Good evening, Dylan Tarr, 8650 State Road 32, Zionsville, Indiana. To answer a couple of the lingering questions, it is a 512 roof pitch. We will go ahead and revise the drawing, so that's fine. We're happy to submit a dumpster enclosure detail to specify the materials. And then the HVAC units are ground mounted. They're behind the screen wall between the two employee entrances on the south side of the building. You can see the bump out of the brick wall on the left of that top. Yeah.
The screen with bricks, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
It looks pretty, it doesn't look bad out. Yeah, any questions?
What about the number one, materials of the trash dumpster? Do you have that?
I don't have it on us, but we're happy to work with Mr. Barney with that. It'll be very similar to the building material.
Any more questions for that? All right, we have a motion. We have a motion. I smell my spaghetti.
I'll make the motion. After review of application case number 2084 STDR, request for the review of a proposed site, design and landscape plan for a dental office land use at 4033 County Lane, adjacent sign on one kitchen in Hornet, consisting of 1.02 acres with zoning, only planning commission approve of the following request, the following conditions, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Mr. Mesa, second. Do we have any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mercer? Little? Yes. Stokes?
Yes.
Vito?
Yes.
Yeager?
Yes.
Egley?
Motion passed, 6 approved, none opposed. Thank you. You can come on over my house. We'll have some garlic toast too. All right. Thank you all. We're going into our last case for tonight. Case 2087, a request.
The subject property highlighted with the blue box. And you can see in the area of other plats that have been approved over time. The city of South Haven is actually across the road, across U.S. Highway 51 North. It's on the east side there. So I tried to label the map accordingly. And then the other area on the west side of the highway is all in the city of Plum Lake. Some of the area zoning, there's PUD zoning to the south of the subject property. Now, this one here is more specific to the plat itself. Again, the blue box highlights the boundaries. It's 22 and a half acres. There's actually two proposed lots here. No floodplain at play at all. No new public road is proposed. The water is the Horn Lake Water Association, as is the sanitary sewer. The current zoning by the city is C-4. In the city of South Haven to the east, there's some C4 there on the corner, and then some PUD, which is planned unit development. And then on the west side of the subject property in the city of Horn Lake, there's R-12 and AR, which is that agricultural residential zoning. Some of the development that's already there now inside the city is the Walgreens. This would be south of the Walgreens. Next slide. So this here has to do with easements. And so what I've tried to do is highlight some deficiencies or areas that need corrected or updated. From the plat, the proper required easement widths are shown upon the plat for utilities, except for the rear yard utility easements along the back of the proposed lots 1 and 2 were a 5. And then also the north side of lot 2 does not show a utility easement at all. So I tried to highlight those with kind of the orange colored ovals. And so we would ask them to revise to meet the standards. Next slide. And they've also shown the setbacks from the zoning ordinance on the plat. And let's see, the shown front yard setbacks are met, but the sides are shown as 20 feet wide, and the rear are shown as 40 feet. But the actual requirement through the C4 zoning is the required side yard setbacks are 25 setback per the C4 zoning is 60 feet. So we would ask them to revise to meet, and also they've mentioned the setbacks in note number 1 on the plat, so they could revise that as well. So now we get into that, that general suitability, and so here that's why I've included the zoning in the area, which I've commented on a little bit before. So to the east, you've got areas of commercial development and C4 and PUD zoning. The PUD zoning is not developed as yet; it's still like grass land use. And then there's R12, which is single-family residential houses over there on the west side of the subject property, and then there's some AR zoning on the northwest portion of the area, northwest, and then Walgreens is zone C-4 by the city. This one again drills down now to like minimum standards per the subdivision regulations. So we have section 3489 minimum standards talking about lowercase letter D for drainage and then E for sidewalks. And so I'll go down to D there. It says from the plat, no mention of site drainage on the plat. Staff comment would please mention will be addressed via the plat. And then E from the plat, no sidewalks proposed. List and show on the plat for the city's subdivision standards the required 5 feet sidewalk for along Highway 51 and Church Road and internal sidewalks as well. Next slide. Again, dealing with minimum standards from the subdivision regulations. Talks here about letter F, which has to do with water supply. The service maps show the Horn Lake Water Association as the local provider for both water and sanitary sewer. Sewer service will come from the south. K there about the minimum standards. No real mention of any erosion or sediment control plans. Comment here would be that this could be a note on the plat that they would, the developer should acknowledge they will comply with cities and federal standards for erosion and sediment control. Next slide. So a possible motion is to recommend approval to the alderman with the following conditions. A, adjust utility easements on plat per the subdivision regulation standards. B, adjust setbacks on the plat to meet the C4 zoning standards. C, add a note of how drainage will be handled via the subdivision plat. B, add a note the subdivision and development will meet the city's requirement for erosion and sediment control. That will conclude presentation unless you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, we have any questions for Mr. Barr? All right. may the applicant come up? State your name and address.
IT Solutions, 8180. As for the setbacks and easements, that was a misread on our part. Standards, those have been adjusted. I believe we did talk about the sidewalk. We needed agreement for putting the sidewalk on 51. See the reason why we couldn't put that flat. All the other.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
You may not know yet, but up to 22 acres, how many houses are we looking at?
So that there's a plan, convenience store is what has that lot. No, so it'd be,
Lot one. Is that one?
lot 2 is going to be a convenience
Lot two.
store. And then lot 2, we plan to cut out 4 individual lots for commercial use.
Okay.
Behind Walgreens will be a convenience store with gas pumps. And I believe we have some parking for us there that's fine. And then other than that, they're looking at food. Like food.
Restaurants?
Like restaurants.
You said RV parking, right? Not RV park.
No, not a park. There's a couple, like RV pool hookups. There's been some people that have been requesting that.
Yeah.
And then also, we're putting some electronic hookups for cars.
You know, the RV park, it's too bad.
So they're hookups. Are you talking about eating hookups? It's gonna be at the gas station?
Yes.
Or will it be a parking?
So it's not an RV park, there's like 6 or 7. And this will probably come up next week as well, but there's like 6 or 7 different at lot 2 that will be hooked up for them to rent inside that convenience store lot, as well as the hookups for
Oh, man, you making moves, huh?
making it.
I see it. Anybody else? Future moves. Any other questions? No more questions?
So the way you're looking at this, you're gonna put in, obviously, if you're gonna have restaurants, you're gonna put in a public road, right?
Yeah, so there are actually, we'll be submitting a different subdivision application for splitting up that, lots for restaurants. And there's an additional planning behind those 4 lots that Chad and I discussed.
But as of now, you have nobody in agreement to come in right now?
No, not on our.
So, Mr. Barr, these requirements, they have been met, or you work with you to make sure there's a sidewalk and address, or that, when that comes back to us, we'll see a new drawing with everything in place?
Very good question. The actual requirement for sidewalks is found in the city's subdivision regulations, and since they're not shown on the plat, that's why I've added that as a condition. And so if you concur with that or whatever, then the aldermen, hopefully they would stay with that. And then so then they would have to revise when they get to the point before they would record the plat, that it would actually show sidewalks on there. But then you'll see more specificity next month with the site plan design review of lot number 2, where they plan to do the gas station. I'm working on that case with the applicant now. So you'll see the development of lot 2, the site plan design review next month.
And that will include the sidewalk, we just want to.
I'm hoping so. I don't remember for sure.
Do Walgreens have a sidewalk?
No.
There's no existing sidewalk.
So, is there a lot of walking traffic down 51 over?
You can't walk, you have no sidewalk, so why walk?
Right.
What was your last name, sir?
Walker.
Walker. Mr. Walker. I can't tell you what to build or not to build, but you said convenience store, gas station. Just a personal opinion. You think it'd be a good idea to build a Papa John's, Domino's?
79,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So there's 4 different days within that convenience store. Things would be I don't know, Subway, probably not.
I wasn't
But-
saying yes or no, I was just
Yeah,
saying.
this is Ward, so, he's taking it kind of personal, things he
Horn
desires.
Horn Lake has a bunch of gas stations.
But EV is different. And that's the future. All right, any more questions? Do we have a motion?
I do have one question before the motion. I might have missed it, but is this the floodplain? What plan is this?
No question.
All right. All right, do we have a motion? Motion one.
Motion. After review of application case number 2087 SDFP, request for a 2-lot commercial subdivision, final plat called Alden Station Commercial, consisting of 22.52 acres plus or minus. The Horn Lake Planning Commission recommends approval of the request to the Board of Aldermen with the following conditions attached to it, and that is A through E.
We have a second.
Second.
Ms. Fidel, second. Do we have any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mercer. Little, yes. Stokes.
Yes.
Goodall. Yes. Yeager.
Yes.
All right, we passed the motion 6, none opposed. Thank you much, Mr. Walker. Thank you. All right, now we're in the other business, y'all. We at the end. Mr. Barr?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to give you an update. At the last meeting for the aldermen, they did approve of the revised proposal by Orion Planning, if I can say it, to update the city's comprehensive plan. They've given us a tentative date of either sometime either in September or October to kick off that process and continue to formulate the creation of the advisory group. We're still, I think, setting at about 14 people on that. We've got a couple of new names, and so that's kind of the update for now. But as we get closer to those dates, we'll be doing more either on the city's webpage. We're just trying to be more vocal about it, to encourage as much public participation as we can. And then we'll be setting probably a calendar for various public meetings around town, because we'll have to gain input. And we'll probably be doing various online survey on various questions to get public input to help formulate the plan or various aspects to it. So I wanted to report that. It's coming along kind of at a snail's pace, but I think things will pick up quite a bit when we get into September and October.
That's a lot of years behind.
It is. I mean, I think the state law lets a plan. It can be good for as long as 20 years, and it'll be 20 years next year. We're in the 19th year of the plan. So, and the way things are changing in society, how quickly the pace of it. I mean, I noticed that as myself, being a planning practitioner for like 30 years. One of the things that's changed the most is the speed. When I started, we barely had, I don't know if we had email yet or whatever, or internet, stuff like that. And now things have a much greater pace. But there's a lot of technological changes coming. There's a lot of societal changes that are occurring, and I'm hoping we get good participation. Because if we don't, well, then it'll be hard. We'll be just kind of guessing. We'll be planning in a vacuum. And so I really want to encourage that input from the public, because that's important. As far as where to shape the city, where it wants to go from a land use policy standpoint, and very specific things or other things that the city might need to do for like public improvements, or whether we need another fire station or police substation, or who knows what they could be or whatever. But we learn of those things from the public input.
And you're still looking for young adults, right?
Yes, I got one new name this morning. I haven't contacted them yet. I hope to contact them tomorrow or Wednesday and just kind of gauge their availability, interest to be on the advisory group. It's not a super young person. I think the person that described it in their 30s. So, but I'm looking basically in that demographic between 19 and 39. to add a few more people there, because I think it's important because they can be the people that, own property, or they're leaving tomorrow, and they have different views and different thoughts on kind of how they process things or whatever. So I think it's important to have that type of representation on the advisory group as well.
My question, when will you have a final list?
Excuse me?
When will you have a final list?
The final list, well, it continues to grow. I mean, I don't want to make it too large, because if it gets to a certain mass, it's like, it just gets too large. But I don't want it too small either. Right now, I think we're at 14. I'm thinking, when we get to 15, 17, that'd be probably like the cutoff, if you will, as far as a nice workable size of people. So I'm anticipating when that group actually starts the meeting, not everybody's going to make every meeting. And so we'll probably end up having 13 or 12 or 11 or whatever. Hopefully they'll be able to make it, but I just, from a realistic standpoint, not everybody's going to have the same calendars and availability and stuff like that. The way I envision this, the way it's been explained to me is, as far as how Orion does planning, comprehensive planning, is at certain points as they're gaining information, whether that be through census data or input from surveys, is that they get to certain points of decision as the plan, they have conflict, they have a question that needs to be that way with that particular topic. And so that's at least the way it's been explained to me by Orion, is that's kind of how the advisory group would function in the planning process. So I don't know if I hopefully I addressed your question.
I think you dodged it every time. All right. We have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
We have a second. Need a roll call?
Yes.
Yes. And we want to thank all the citizens for coming out and being with us today. Thank you all for being one of our biggest citizen crowds. Thank you. Surrounded by good people. Yeah, y'all experts. I know you need that.